Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey guys, it's getting cold and I kind of like it because I love sweatshirt weather. But if it could just stop here and not get any colder, which I know isn't a thing that's going to happen, I'd be happy. So let's go. Not important. Well, I hope everyone's doing well. Preemptive like, original link to the video from Deconstructed, top of the description. The genius design of medieval castles. Love it.
In the age of knights and
Let's learn. Hope everyone's doing well. Hi guys. Sorry. I'm repeating myself. Okay.
in the age of knights and kings, nothing commanded power like the medieval castle. More than a home, it was a fortress, armed with layered defenses to keep enemies at bay. A drawbridge that could rise in an instant, leaving only the black waters of the moats below. A portcullis of iron and wood, ready to slam shut in the attacker's path. And murder holes raining danger from above. In this video, we've modeled the ultimate medieval castle, from the outmost walls to the heart of the castle, to reveal the engineering that made it nearly impossible to...
I don't know why this is the first thing I'm thinking of, but didn't the Mongols, in order to capture castles, they would launch sick bodies, I don't know if they were with the plague or not, into the castle? And as horrific and barbaric as that is, kind of seems pretty, like it would be pretty effective. And so, would armies have like a poison division, so to speak? Like, poison the water supply if you can. I'm assuming they would have wells within the castle. But was that, if I'm correct, that the Mongols actually did that, which I'm not certain I am correct. Is that the first instance that we know of biological warfare? / chemical
parts of the castle, to reveal the engineering that made it nearly impossible to take. But before we get into it, I'm Lion, and this is Deconstructed. We break down the engineering behind history's most fascinating and today's most advanced machines and structures. So let's see how it all works.
Antarctic buildings.
The product of a feudal world, the medieval castle was built during the Middle Ages by royalty, nobility, and powerful military orders. More than just stone walls, it was a fortified private residence, a stronghold for defense, an administrative hub, and the seat of daily life for those within its protection. In the 9th century, the Carolingian Empire, founded by Charlemagne, united much of Western and Central Europe under a single Christian rule, spanning present-day France, Germany, Northern Italy, and parts of Eastern Europe. But when the empire collapsed in the late 9th century, central authority crumbled, and power splintered into the hands of regional lords and nobles. It was in this fractured landscape that castles emerged, localized power centers where nobles could protect and govern their lands. Under the feudal system, land was exchanged for loyalty and military service, and castles became the physical embodiment of that bond. Facing constant threats from Magyars, Muslims, and Vikings, defense was paramount, and location was everything.
What was that for? Vikings, Muslims, and who?
Of that bond. Facing constant threats from Magyars, Muslims, and Vikings, defense was paramount, and location was everything. To maximize visibility, castles were often built on elevated terrain, overlooking key rivers and trade routes.
Also makes it harder to...
The earliest castles in medieval Europe, built from the 10th century and onwards, were simple motte and bailey designs.
Better for defense.
A wooden tower on a raised mound, with a lower bailey enclosed below. During the 12th century, a scientific approach to castle defense emerged, and castle building entered its golden age. Driven by the ambitions of the Norman rulers, these fortifications grew from simple timber structures into massive stone strongholds, with thick curtain walls, fortified gatehouses, and flanking towers. At their heart stood the stone keep, the ultimate refuge.
One thing I forget about is that the amazing castles that we see today as kind of ruins, or some are less destroyed than others, is really just the skeleton of what it would have looked like in its prime heyday, right? With all of the wooden and different structures that would have naturally, or by humans, deteriorated over time. So they look awesome already, but they would have been even cooler looking back in the day, right?
In this video, their heart stood the stone keep, the ultimate refuge. In this video, we'll focus on the most advanced form of the medieval castle, the concentric fortress, combining the most iconic features into one detailed reconstruction. While no two castles were identical, our model blends elements from the 11th to 14th centuries to create the ultimate medieval stronghold. Before we jump inside, a quick note: we've put together a medieval castle collection to go with this video, and it's discounted for a limited time. I'll share more about that later.
Okay, so there's a difference between... I thought for a large portion of my life that medieval and Middle Ages, the medieval era and the Middle Ages were interchangeable terms describing the same thing. But so the medieval era is kind of the 1000s to 1400, but the Middle Ages goes all the way back to like the breakdown of the Roman Empire in Western Europe, right? See, I'm sure I sounded like I was, now I'm sure what I'm talking about, but clearly I guess I'm not. If I'm wrong there, please correct me. You guys are great at that.
Now let's follow the path an attacking force would face when attacking the ultimate castle, advancing step by step towards the heart of the castle. Before making it inside the castle walls, the first obstacle would be the Barbican, a fortified gateway positioned in front of the main entrance, designed to expose attackers to defensive fire before they even reach the main gate. The gate itself was built of thick timber reinforced with iron, capable of absorbing relentless battering at what was often the most targeted point of attack.
Wrong.
From the inside, it was secured by a massive drawbar, a thick wooden beam that locked the doors in place. The beam sat in deep sockets carved into the stone walls on either side of the entrance. To secure the gate, the beam was slid from one socket across the door and into the other, bracing it against impact.
What about setting fire to it? Is that a feasible thing? Is that a ridiculous statement by me? If an obstacle was especially tough, could you like put down some bundles and just start a fire and sit back and wait until it breaks it down?
Towering overhead, the battlements formed a defensive crown, a parapet cut with evenly spaced gaps called embrasures or crenels. Between them stood the merlons, solid stone shields for the defenders above. From here, they could dart out to fire arrows or drop projectiles, then vanish back into cover. Behind the battlements ran the wall walk, an elevated path accessible by stairs or ladders, allowing defenders to rush along the ramparts and reinforce any point that came under siege. From the wall walk, the battlement towers loomed higher still.
Guys, what about putting wooden posts straight out, like perpendicular, like straight out from the top? It's hard for me to illustrate it with my pointer because it's a 2D image. But like right here, like straight out and then create like... So straight out and then put... I think this is a good idea. So couldn't you put like wooden beams straight out and then attach other wooden beams along it to create a sort of fence that's flat down so that if you put a ladder to try and siege over the wall, then they would have to like... The ladder would have to go onto this thing, this imaginary wooden like pole I'm thinking of, and then they would have to like jump over a gap to even get to the castle. No? Maybe
Giving
not.
defenders sweeping views and deadly attack angles. From these elevated positions, they could sweep the walls with flanking fire, hitting anyone trying to approach or scale them.
Yeah,
Sometimes setting fire.
So imagine if there was a pole out to here and then a gap here, and so the ladder would go against this pole, and then if they get to the top, they have to kind of jump over to get to here.
Hitting anyone trying to approach or scale them. Sometimes set into the merlons were narrow vertical openings called arrow slits, secured firing points that allowed archers or crossbowmen to strike while staying almost entirely hidden. Some were shaped to suit specific weapons and tactics, and in places, wooden shutters offered yet another layer of defense between shots. But even the strongest defense mechanisms can be tested. Just recently, there was a security scare at Windsor Castle, an intruder making it past security before being stopped. There were a variety of headlines like "Intruder arrested on the grounds of Windsor Castle" and "Man arrested at Windsor."
The ground. See, guys, fast forward if you want for the sponsor. It's going to be Ground News, obviously. I believe. I hope I'm not wrong. If you're interested and you watch it with me, thank you for keeping me company. And if you're interested, just make sure to use the promo codes and links from the original channel. The original link to the channel, top of the description, down below.
Castle for trespass drug possession. The thing is, the same story can be told in completely different ways, and it's easy to miss half the picture without even realizing it. I like being able to see how multiple outlets report the same event, how certain words can subtly change the tone, and even which details, like the mention of drug possession or Prince William, are included or left out. Which is why I use Ground News, an app and website that shows how many outlets are covering a story and lets you compare headlines across the political spectrum side by side, so you can see how each version is framed. You can check out each outlet's bias rating, factuality, and ownership details, and even use their blind spot.
This is so true, and it's so sad. It's like neither of these headlines are false, but they're not trying to give you a clear picture. They're trying to say it in a way that's not them lying, but that twists you into believing one side or the other. And again, I'm going both left and right wing. I'm not calling out one side.
It's bias rating, factuality, and ownership details, and even use their blind spot feature to find stories one side of the spectrum might be missing entirely. I like it because it takes minutes, not hours, to get the full picture. You're not stuck in a news bubble, and you can make up your own mind about what matters. Use my link ground.news/deconstructed for 40% off their Vantage plan. It's private, ad-free, and a better way to see the world without the spin. Alright, back to the castle. Breaking the Barbican defense was no guarantee to progress for enemies. The moats, a deep wide ditch often filled with water, encircled the fortress like a final warning. It stopped siege towers and battering rams long before they could touch the outer walls, forcing attackers to first fill it with earth just to get within striking distance. The moat also served another purpose. It made undermining nearly impossible, blocking the tactic of digging underneath the castle walls to collapse them using a wooden framework that was then set on fire.
I never thought about that. Good point.
With the moat stretching out before the gate, the only direct path to the outer gate was across the drawbridge. Built as a heavy wooden deck hinged at the gatehouse threshold, it could be raised or lowered to control entry. In its most common form, chains attached to the outer end ran through pulleys above the gate, operated by a windlass in the room above the passage.
I wonder if you could create a ladder that goes up to the point, like from here to there, and then you can like try and bang away at the chains for it to fall, but then you'd probably be killed in the process.
To control entry. In its most common form, chains attached to the outer end ran through pulleys above the gate, operated by a windlass in the room above the passage. When raised, the bridge folded up flush against the gatehouse, becoming yet another barrier between enemies and the castle. Only lighter bridges could be lifted this way, without any counterweight assistance. For larger, heavier bridges, a counterweight system was often added. As the windlass turned to raise the deck, the counterweights descended inside the gatehouse, offsetting the bridge's weight and making the lift far easier. Another approach was the bascule bridge. In this design, the bridge extended into the gate passage and over a pit. When raised, the inner section swung down into the pit, assisted by a counterweight beneath the bridge. Chains attached to the inner end and operated by a windlass in the room above allowed it to be lowered or raised smoothly. This setup also prevented the bridge from flipping if someone stepped on its inner end, while the pit itself created an extra obstacle for anyone trying to cross.
Yeah, I understand that, but why would you need the inner Okay.
By the 14th century, a simpler variant emerged. Like the first and second types, it used chains, but these were fixed to pivoting arms called gaffs, mounted above and parallel to the bridge. These arms extended back into the gatehouse, where heavy counterweights were mounted on their inner ends. This balanced the bridge so well it could be raised or lowered by hand. When lifted, the arms locked neatly into slots in the gatehouse wall, holding the bridge securely in its upright position. With the drawbridge lowered, attackers could rush straight into the next trap, the outer gatehouse. This fortified gateway controlled access to the outer bailey, the first open courtyard inside the castle walls. At its entrance stood another massive wooden gate, secured from within by a heavy bar lock, a thick wooden beam resting across the door, held in place by sturdy metal brackets. Up above, battlements like at the Barbican crowned the structure, while machicolations jutted out from the wall. These floor openings sit between stone supports called corbels, allow defenders to drop stones and arrows on anyone trapped below. There were also arrow slits on the second floor of the gatehouse. Some gatehouses were even built as half towers, open at the rear so that if attackers broke through, they couldn't hold the position. Instead, they'd be exposed to fire from the walls and towers deeper inside the castle. In a siege like this one, defenders
Fast forward if you want.
so arrow slits on the second floor of the gatehouse. Some gatehouses were even built as half towers, open at the rear.
Oh.
So that if attackers broke through, they couldn't hold the position. Instead,
I don't know
they'd be
why I was
exposed
confused.
to fire from the walls and towers deeper inside the castle.
Understood.
In a siege like this one, defenders might add temporary wooden structures on top of the wall battlements, called hoardings. Through arrow slits in the walls and holes in the floor, they could fire down on attackers at the base. These worked much like machicolations. Though being wooden, they were vulnerable to fire, which is why defenders sometimes covered their roofs with wet animal hides to resist flaming arrows. Even the base of the wall works against attackers. The talus, an outward sloping section of stone, also called the batter or plinth, would blunt the impact of battering rams.
I thought that would just be for structural support for the wall, but okay.
Push scaling ladders into angles where they were more likely to break, and stop siege towers from getting close enough to deploy their drawbridges. Should the outer defenses fall, the next objective for any attacking force was the inner gatehouse, the final and most heavily fortified gateway in the castle. This four-story stronghold controlled access to the inner bailey, where the keep stood, and its arched gate passage was flanked on both sides by massive semicircular towers. High above the entrance, many of the same defense mechanisms used at the Barbican and outer gate were deployed. Machicolations allowed defenders to drop stones and arrows onto anyone below. Battlements provided cover for archers, while arrow slits cut into the towers gave them clear firing angles on the enemy's approach.
Imagine, it must have happened at least once in medieval warfare. At least one person had to have been killed by an arrow through the arrow slit, like from the attacker to the defender. And imagine how much of a bragging point that would be, like with the boys, the other soldiers later that day if you won. Be like, hey, Jerry shot and killed a guy through the arrow slit. You know? That had to have happened at least like once, right?
Just inside the entrance stood another heavy wooden gate, and beyond it the portcullis, a massive gridded barrier of wood and iron, running in vertical grooves on either side of the passage. At its base, sharp metal spikes were designed to crush anyone caught beneath as it dropped. The portcullis was attached to chains running through pulleys above, operated by a windlass in the room over the passage. Counterweights also helped balance the load. In an emergency, defenders could release the chain to let it slam down under its own weight with deadly force. Passing through the gatehouse passage along the center of the gatehouse would be even more dangerous. Narrow and enclosed, it funneled attackers into a confined space.
I'm sure that not only with a lot of the weight and force that the portcullis goes down with, not only, I feel like it maybe killing someone would be secondary to the fact that if there is a body or something underneath it, it could prevent it from fully shutting, which would be much more detrimental than killing someone underneath it would be beneficiary. And so I'm assuming that the harder it falls, the more likelihood it will of actually going all the way down and into its grooves.
Where they would be targeted from above, close along the center of the gatehouse would be even more dangerous. Narrow and enclosed, it funneled attackers into a confined space where they would be targeted from above and from both sides. Many castles had 2 or more portcullises, trapping attackers between them. In this killing zone, they would be bombarded through murder holes in the ceiling, openings between the portcullises where rocks, arrows, bolts, or boiling oil could rain down. Arrow slits in the side rooms also allowed defenders in nearby rooms to fire into the passage as well. Inside the gatehouse, the first level often housed a dungeon, or oubliette, which is French for to forget.
Yep.
This underground prison cell had a narrow opening at the top with a wider chamber below and was only accessible from above through a trapdoor.
From what I've learned about oubliettes, this seems to be a pretty comfortable one. He's even laying down, and you can see light right through it. It seems to be pretty dry. I've learned about oubliettes in a few videos, but one that I mainly remember is when it came to the Bastille in history, the French prison near Paris, the Bastille, where like some oubliettes, like you couldn't even stand because it was so small of a hole. I mean, you couldn't sit down because it was such a thin, like it wasn't wide enough for you to be able to do anything like that. And it would be really wet and dark, and there'd be rats and...
Up with a wider chamber below, and was only accessible from above through a trapdoor.
It's like a New York apartment.
Could be placed on both sides of the gatehouse, manned by soldiers ready to defend the gate from within. The second level typically served as an armory, storing weapons, armor, and siege supplies. Above that, the third level held the barracks, the communal living quarters for the guards who kept watch over the castle's most critical gateway. The inner gatehouse was a fortified doorway within the castle's strongest line, the inner curtain wall. Taller and thicker than the outer wall, sometimes exceeding 10 meters in height, it was built to dominate the space around it. From the wall walk along its top, defenders protected by battlements could fire down not only on attackers outside, but also on those who had managed to get into the inner bailey. The wall's strength came from its construction, 2 outer layers of stone packed with rubble and mortar between them.
Yeah, you can see this in a lot of ruins of medieval castles, where a lot of the time this layer will be stripped down, will kind of fall apart, and then you'll see very rough walls to it. That is the brick is like the mortar part of it. That's basically all I'm trying to say. Is like I'll see walls and I'll be like, I thought they would be perfectly laid bricks. These are just, it looks like a bunch of like concrete with rocks in it, but that's because the original outer walls fell down over time.
Hidden within its length was sometimes the postern gate, a small, often concealed doorway at the rear, allowing defenders to slip in and out unseen, perfect for messengers, scouts, or counterattacks.
Seems risky.
At regular intervals along the curtain wall rose the wall towers, reinforcing the defense just as the Barbican towers had before. From these elevated positions, defenders could unleash flanking fire along the walls, striking any force trying to approach or scale them. Each tower was topped with battlements, and arrows reinforcing defense just as the Barbican towers had before the wall towers. At regular intervals along the curtain wall rose the wall towers, reinforcing the defense just as the Barbican towers had before. From these elevated positions, defenders could unleash flanking fire along the walls, striking any force trying to approach or scale them. Each tower was topped with battlements, and arrow slits cut into the walls allowed archers to shoot while staying protected. Inside, the towers were multi-level structures. Some floors might store food, wood, projectiles, and tools, while others could house armories, guard rooms, or barracks. The towers came in different shapes, each with distinct strengths and weaknesses. Square towers were easier and faster to build,
But the edges
and
were
offered
more
larger
brittle?
interior space. But their corners were structurally weak, making them more vulnerable to undermining or battering, and flat walls were more easily damaged by projectiles. Round towers saw
That makes sense, because with the square tower, when you hit it, the stones have a place to go. They can go out this way and be destroyed. But with a circular tower, anywhere you hit is going to be braced by all of the things around it, and so there's no weak point, right? Kind of the reason why an arch is a really strong structure. Same principle, right?
solved many of these
If I'm saying anything incorrect, which is a very high chance, let me know, guys.
issues. They're damaged by projectiles. Round towers solved many of these issues. Their curved surfaces deflected projectiles and resisted tunneling better. But they were more complex and time-consuming to build, with less interior space. D-shaped towers offered a compromise, a curved, exposed side with the defensive advantages of a round tower, paired with a flat rear that was easier to construct, though it still retained some of the square tower's vulnerabilities. Inside the inner bailey, daily life continued even under siege. This open space, enclosed by the inner curtain wall, was where much of daily life and work took place.
I thought during a siege, because I would figure most daily life and work would take place outside of the structure altogether, and then everyone would push into the castle if they're being besieged.
The stables kept the castle's horses ready, vital for transport, communication, and mounted defense. Workshops for blacksmith, carpenters, and other craftsmen maintained weapons, armor, and the castle itself.
What about water?
The kitchen stored food and prepared meals for soldiers, servants, and laborers, while the chapel provided a place of worship, keeping faith close to home in a world where religion shaped daily life. At the center, the well offered a reliable source of fresh water, ensuring the castle could endure even the longest siege without surrender. Reaching this point meant the siege had broken through nearly every defensive line, leaving only the keep. The keep, also called the dungeon, not to be confused with the dungeon, was the castle's ultimate stronghold, a massive, multi-story fortified tower, often the largest and strongest in the entire fortress.
But it's not
By
rounded.
the late 12th century, stronger curtain walls and rounded towers made keeps unnecessary, with main rooms moved into towers or separate buildings in the inner bailey. When the keep was still central to a castle's defense, it was both the lord's main residence and a last resort refuge if every other defense fell.
The castle within the castle.
Extra thick walls,
With a
few
fortress within it.
windows, and reinforced with four-corner towers that served as elevated lookout points and firing positions, it was designed to be nearly impossible to take. Most keeps were approached through a forebuilding, a fortified structure shielding the main entrance on the first floor above. Narrow stairs led up to a first-floor doorway, forcing attackers into a tight, easily defended space. Arrow slits lined the forebuilding, and some even included another drawbridge and their own gate to delay attackers. Inside, the keep rose floor after floor, connected by spiral staircases, built
I love spiral staircases. Is he going to mention how it's important which way to spiral it?
into the towers. These typically ascended clockwise, a design that favored right-handed defenders coming down, their swords arms free, while cramping
So smart. Simple and yet smart. Because the majority of people are right-handed. And so I wonder if you would have a siege team of mainly left-handed people for when you have to go up spiral staircases. Just because if you're, you know the reason why, right? Like, if you're right-handed, if this guy's right-handed and this guy's right-handed, then he can swing with all his strength, and what can he do? You know?
the swing
I was gonna say I love spiral staircases, so
of right-handed down, their swords arms free, while cramping the swing of right-handed attackers climbing up. The ground floor or cellar stored the provisions needed to survive a long siege: dry goods, perishable food, wine, ale, and sometimes a well for fresh water. Some keeps also had a kitchen here, reserved for preparing meals for the Lord's family and honored guests.
is there an
The first
escape
floor,
route?
the entrance level, was dominated by the Great Hall, where the Lord conducted business, hosted meetings, and held grand feasts. Often the largest room in the keep, it sometimes spanned 2 stories with a soaring ceiling. Above, on the second floor gallery, a mural walkway ran within the thickness of the walls, its windows bringing light into the hall below. If the hall was breached, defenders could use this gallery to fire down on attackers from above. Guest chambers for important visitors were located on the 3rd floor. On the same level was the solar, the private living and sleeping quarters for the Lord and his family. This floor also contained the private chapel.
Well, if you reach the point in a siege where everyone is now, all the defenders are now in here and are still holding out, they do have a well, a second well that's within these walls, so that's crucial. But essentially, you'd have to house everyone sleeping.
Reserved for their use, as well as the garderobes, from the French for wardrobe. Simple toilets where waste dropped down vertical shafts into pits, or in some cases directly into the moat. At the very top, the keep's battlements and wall walks offered a commanding view of the surrounding countryside and one last elevated line of defense. If the keep fell, the siege would be over, defenders captured, banners torn down. No fortress could hold out forever. By the 15th century, a new threat emerged that no portcullis, wall, or tower could truly withstand. Gunpowder artillery transformed warfare, reducing once impenetrable stone fortifications to rubble under the thunder of cannon fire. By the 16th century, the medieval castle was militarily obsolete. In its place rose artillery forts with low, angled walls to deflect cannonballs and earthen ramparts from moat excavations to absorb their impact. Built purely for war, they offered no role as a noble residence. The nobility shifted to chateaus, grand estates designed for comfort, aesthetics, and prestige over defense. Some castles survived as residences or administrative centers. Others were abandoned, fell into ruin, or were repurposed as prisons. Today, castles stand as more than just relics of war. They are enduring symbols of medieval ingenuity, social hierarchy, and cultural identity. Monuments to a time when stone walls were both the heart of a home and the edge of a battlefield. We've put together a medieval castle poster, desk mat, and a hoodie to go with this video. For the next 7 days only, they're all 10% off. And we're giving one poster away.
Oh, wow.
To enter the giveaway, like the video.
That right there is amazing. Okay, guys. Amazing video. I do want to see if I can illustrate what I mean, okay, by this idea I have, which could be stupid, all right? But what if... that could be... Okay, this is a good image to illustrate my point here. So I think I can draw. Can I? Draw... Okay, good. Oh, why is that? So what if you did this? If you made poles like this, here, 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 and then another pole like that, right? It's a very simple structure, so that it would get in the way of you trying to fire down, wouldn't it? Shoot. Okay, make it foldable up, so that when they're coming with ladders, it would still get in the way, though, wouldn't it? Shoot. What? Do you know my idea, though? So instead of the ladder going here, it would have to go against here. And then, even if they get to the top, they got to kind of hop over this to get to there. But I'm kind of seeing flaws in my idea here. Anyways, love y'all. Hope you're all doing well. I'd appreciate any comments down below. Correcting anything I said that might have been wrong. Great possibility. Answering any of my questions. You guys are always awesome with that. And I hope to see you next time. We'll keep on learning together. Bye, guys.